Masechet Sotah, Daf Kaf Bet, a series of very important agadot today. The last thing we did was talking about the Rasha Arum, the evildoer who is cunning, and we brought 7 examples of such people. The last one is someone who has studied Mikra and studied Mishnah. Sounds like a really good thing. He knows Tanakh, he knows Mishnah, but he never served Talmidei Chachamim, so he knows all these things by heart, but never apprenticed and studied with sages what the meaning of all those Pisukim and all those Mishnayot are. So what's the danger? Why should that person be a Rasha Arum? He's Arum because of this knowledge, but why Rasha? So we're going to explain it. Itmar, Karav Shana velo shimesh Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbi Elazar omer, Harei ze am haaretz. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmi amar, Harei ze bur. Rabbi Yanai omer, Harei ze kuti. And so regarding such a person who knows Tanakh and Mishnah, but never served Torah scholars, so we have a few different opinions of what this person is like. Each one is worse than the one before. One says, Am haaretz, a person literally of the land, like a simpleton, a regular farmer who doesn't know anything. Okay, that's pretty good. I wish all of our high school graduates would be so simple that they would know Tanakh and Mishnah. Okay, Rabbi Shemuel says, no, this is a bur, same in Hebrew and in English, right? This person is even worse than an Am haaretz. It's more negative. Amma is just an ignoramus. This is, really like low class. Rabbi Yanai says it's a kuti, meaning a Samaritan. The Samaritans were a group of people that are descendant of the 10 northern tribes that when during the exile they were mixed with other people who moved in, and they believe in Torah only, Chumash, not Nevi'im, not Ketuvim, because they don't believe that Yerushalayim is the capital of Israel, but rather that it's in the north, and Nevi'im and Ketuvim always talking about Yerushalayim. But whatever they do diligently, meaning their own interpretations of Chumash, which are completely different because they also reject the Torah Shebe'al Peh. They are like a kuti, someone who knows Mikra, so is going to be able to follow Mikra, but won't know the proper interpretation. And even though they know Mishnah, so it's not exactly like a Samaritan, but they'll be similar to a Samaritan in that they didn't study with the sages to know the proper interpretation of the Torah and of the Mishnah. And therefore, they're going to decide halacha just based on that memorization, and that's not the way halacha works. You can't just open up a pasuk or even open up a mishnah and say this is the halacha. So, because you need to know all the later interpretations of what poskim said, what is a minority opinion, what's a majority opinion, and exactly how to apply it. So they'll end up doing some form of Torah practice, but like the Samaritans also do a form of Torah practice, but not the proper one. Rav Acha bar Yaakov omer, Harei ze magosh. Okay, even worse than a kuti is a sorcerer. This is a Zoroastrian priest. Why is it like that? Because these magicians would say statements of sorcery that make no sense, just abracadabra. They just memorize that this is what you say as a magic spell. And so therefore, these people who know Mishnah by heart, but they don't know what it means, they just recite it by heart. There's a lot of people that actually know parts of Tanakh by heart. They know Tehillim by heart, or prayers by heart, or even other books by heart, but they never learned what it means, so they can recite the whole Tehillim, but ask them, what does this pasuk mean? They don't know. It's just like magic formulas to them that they don't understand. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Mistabera ke Rav Acha bar Yaakov de'amrei inashe, Raten magosha velo yada mai amar, Tanetana velo yada mai amar. And Rav Nachman says, I agree with the last opinion that of Rav Acha, who said that there's like magicians, because you know what people commonly say about the magician is that the sorcerer chants, and the sorcerer chants and does not know what he is saying. So too, right? That's what people say, right? They're just nonsense. And so too, the Tana is the professional memorizer. There'll always be in every Bet Midrash a person that has phenomenal memory, although they weren't necessarily the sharpest in understanding. They just had a good memory, and they could tell you exactly, memorize Mishnayot, Beraitot by heart. But they don't know what they're saying. They just say it word for word. Now, these people were very important to have. They're the walking books, so that, any student wants to say, hey, remind me that Mishnah, he would be able to recite it. But even though they had an important role, you're not going to go ask them for a halacha or even for advice, because although they know everything, but they don't know the meaning of anything. And so then in that way, they are like these sorcerers. Tanur Banan, Ezehu Am Haaretz. Now that we mentioned Am Haaretz, let's talk more about them. Kol shono koreh kriyat shema shacharit v'arvit bebirchoteha divrei Rabbi Meir. Am Haaretz is someone who doesn't say Shema and its in the morning and the evening with its berachot. So what does that mean? Either that he doesn't say anything at all, not kriyat Shema and not the berachot, or maybe it means he says Shema, but he doesn't say it with the berachot. There's other versions of it that don't have the word birchoteha, which means they don't say Shema at all. But this version sounds like even if one would say Shema, but not in the proper context. The berachot give you the context of what this means and why you should be saying it. Berachot about Hashem creates the world, Yoseh Or, makes a separation between light and dark and light, good and evil. Hashem loves us and therefore gives us a Torah, Geula, right? These are the important themes that are in Shema. So you said Shema, but you didn't bring out the themes that are there in those berachot of praise, according to Rabbi Meir. Hachamim omrim kol she'eno maniach tefillin. Ben Azai omer kol she'en lo sisit bebigdo. Rabbi Yonatan ben Yosef amar kol sheyesh lo banim ve'eno megadelan lilmod Torah. Acherim omerim afilu koreh ve'shoneh ve'lo shimesh tamidei chachamim zehu am haaretz. Other opinions, Chachamim say, if he doesn't put on tefillin. And another person says if he doesn't put on tzitzit. Now, why these? Because these are the items that are mentioned in Shema. So we could be referring to someone who says Shema, but then ignores his own advice. He's saying Shema, how important it is to put on tefillin as a remembrance of Hashem's unity and the mitzvot. But then he doesn't put on tefillin. The third paragraph talks about tzitzit. So he's talking about, right, that putting on tzitzit, and he doesn't actually put them on. The Shema also says, V'shinantam lebanecha. And so he's saying Shema, but he doesn't actually go and teach his children Torah and bring them up to study Torah themselves. Right? V'limadatem otam. You have to teach them. And the last opinion is, even if person does read Mikra and he studies Mishnah, but he doesn't study with scholars, that is also an Am Haaretz. So this last opinion here is similar to the first opinion that we said up here, that this person is an Am Haaretz. קרא ולא שנה, הרי זו בור. לא קרא ולא שנה, עליו הכתוב אומר, וזרעתי את בית ישראל ואת בית יהודה, זרע אדם וזרע בהמה. Now we have an alternate interpretation, understanding what a בור is. A בור is someone who knows only Tanakh, but never studied Mishnah. And someone who studies not Tanakh and not Mishnah, about that person, Yirmiyah says, right, days will come and I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah with seeds of man and those of beasts. In other words, who's that of men? That's the people who study Torah and study Mishnah and are knowledgeable. Whereas those who don't study anything, they're compared to beasts. They live their lives, but they have no knowledge. They don't use their mind that they were created with. Okay, Yera et Hashem beni v'amelech im shonim al tit'arav. A pasuk from Mishle says, my son, fear God and don't meddle with those who are shonim. Okay, the simple reading could be shonim. Don't deal with people who are fickle. Like they keep changing their minds. One day they're your friend, one day they're not. One day they tell you good advice, one day they tell you bad advice. Right? Don't be friends with them. Rabbi Yitzchak has a fantastic drasha. Shonim is also those who repeat, the repeaters, the memorizers of halachot, of Mishnah. Right? Don't get yourself involved with those who repeat Mishnah and know it by heart. What an amazing thing. to say, right? This would be, I would love to be friends with people who know Mishnah by heart. But the point is, they only know Mishnah by heart, and we'll see in a second, right, that that's all they know, and then they go ahead and they decide halacha based on Mishnayot that they know by heart, but they don't really understand it well. So don't collaborate with them. So we ask, Peshita, isn't that obvious that one should not be part of a group that they only memorize Mishnah but don't know what it means? No, I might think that shonim might refer to someone who repeatedly sins. As Rav Huna said, once a person violates a sin once and twice, and repeats it, then it becomes like it's permitted, right? The first time someone eats non-kosher, so he feels bad, he feels guilty, but then, he likes it, he goes again, and that's it. By the third time, he's used to it already and doesn't feel guilty anymore. So here he's saying, right, have a fear of God, and don't be together with people who repeatedly sin and have no fear of heaven, and they don't care. So I might have thought that that's what it means, only what it means. So therefore, to be a slach has to come and say, no, shanim. Of course, people who sin repeatedly you shouldn't be together with, but even people who only study Mishnah by heart, don't be together with. Tana Hatanaim ebale olam. Similar thought that these professional reciters, memorizers, they destroy the world. Mevale olam sakadatech. Really, they destroy the world? Those are our books, right? We kind of need them to ensure the proper transmission of the Torah Shebe'al Peh. The problem is that they go and teach halacha, they think they know everything, and people look up to them. So, tell me you must know everything, so tell me the halacha. It would be like asking Google for halacha l'maaseh. Yeah, all the information is there, but it doesn't mean that it's processing it and understanding it and applying it properly. So it's good to know Mishnah by heart, and if that you have a good memory and you could be the walking book, fantastic. But just know no one's place. You're only the walking book. But you're not the teacher or the posek. Tanyan mehachi. Amar Rabbi Yoshua v'chi mevale olam hen v'lo miyashebe olam hen shnemar halichot olam lo ela shemorin halacha mitoch mishnatan. And similarly, there's a braita that says, is it true that though the Tanaim, the memorizers, destroy the world? But no, it should be the opposite. They're the ones who settle the world. As it says, halichot, those who study halachot, who memorize halachot, olam lo, the world is theirs, right? The world exists because of them. Rather, yes, that is good if that they memorize halachot. The problem is that they teach the halacha. They teach the final. The halacha has two meanings. Halacha could mean the mishnayot or the practical halacha application. So they're teaching the halachic rulings from their mishnah, from their memorization. And that's not proper, because in the Mishnah there's minority opinions, majority opinions, there's particular cases. So often the Gemara says this only applies in a certain specific case, but not in another one. So you have to know all the reasoning and comparisons of cases in order to actually give a legal ruling. Okay, the next item that the Mishnah mentioned is Isha Perusha, an abstinent woman, also someone who destroys the world. So what does that mean? Tanura Banan Betula Sal Yatnit Valmana Shovavit Vekatan Shelo Kalu Lo Hadashav Hare Elu Mevale Olam. So we can explain this in terms of this following braita that says Betula, a woman who's not married, who prays too much. We'll see what's wrong with praying too much, but it could be all she does is pray and doesn't do anything, and doesn't take care of any responsibilities she has towards herself and towards others. Second, almana shovavit, an almana who keeps returning. Could be a neighbor who keeps coming over, kind of a nosy neighbor, too nosy. Or more likely, we know that widows in the olden days, if they didn't have anyone to support them, if their husbands died, and women generally couldn't get jobs, so unfortunately, widows sometimes had to go and become zonot. So she goes around sovavit. She goes and keeps returning to certain people, and so this is a bad situation. And a child who is a preemie. Well, we'll see what that means, right? What's wrong? The child didn't do anything by being born not in a full term of months. Anyway, these three people destroy the world. Now we ask about the Betulah, Salyanit, a Betulah who prays a lot, and the following statement sounds like it's good for a Betulah to be praying. Ini v'hamad b'Yochanan. We can learn a paradigm of fear of sin from a Betulah and the paradigm of receiving reward, extra reward, from an almana. Yirat chet bebetula de Rabbi Yochanan shema'ah lehahi betula de nafla pa v'kamra. Ribono she'olam, barata gan ayadinu barata gehinam, barata sadikim barata reshem mirasum lefanecha shelo yikashelu bi bnei adam. One time, Rabbi Yochanan heard a certain young woman that she fell on her face, meaning in prayer. She did nefilat apayim, and she prayed the following prayer: Master of the universe, you created God, and then you also created Gehenna. You created righteous people, you created evil people. May it be your will that nobody should stumble because of me. You see what a beautiful prayer this is. Not only did she pray that she should not sin, but she also prayed that no one should see her, be aroused by her, and that cause them to go and sin, and then they would be in the second category here. So she was so worried about sin, not only for herself, but also for other people. We can learn how important it is to increase reward for doing mitzvot from a certain almanah who had a bet knesset in her neighborhood, and nevertheless she would travel far away and pray only in the bet midrash of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar betilo bet knesset b'shivutech, and Rabbi Yochanan saw her and said, "My daughter, isn't there a bet knesset in your neighborhood? How come you travel all the way here to my bet midrash?" Amar Rabbi lo sachar pesiot yeshli, and this widow said, "Don't I have reward for taking steps?" Right? The more effort that one has to put in, the greater the reward. And so rather than go to the local one, I go all the way to this far one. Also in general, it's better to pray in a bet midrash than in a bet knesset. And maybe she wants to be influenced by the righteousness of Rabbi Yochanan. So we see that, lots of people go to Bet Knesset, but look how she went the extra mile, literally. And so we learn rewarded mitzvot from her. So this is a problem, this is a challenge, because on the one hand we said Betulah Salyanit is a bad thing. But here's a Betulah who made a prayer, and this was a positive thing. So what's wrong with a Betulah praying? Ki kamar kegon Yohani bat retibi. No, we're not talking about general prayer is good, and Betulah, anyone who prays is good. But when we're talking about the negative one, it's someone, for example, like this Yohani bat retibi. The Gemara doesn't say here what's wrong with her, but she explains that she was a sorceress, and she would go and cast spells upon people against women who were in labor, and she would cast a spell that the baby would not come out, cause them tremendous pain. And then Yochani would come and show up and say, "Hey, you know what? I'll pray for you." And then she would go and just remove the spell, and the baby would be born. And everybody would go and thank her. "Oh, you prayed, right?" So this is false piety. She actually caused the problem to begin with, and then she comes and brings the solution and makes believe that it's her prayer that solved the problem. So praying is good. It's this false piety of a woman like Yochani, that's what causes the world to be destroyed. And there's many examples of people who cause problems and then they solve it, and so people think that they're heroes, but if they did a better job and didn't cause the problem in the first place, then would it be better overall? Okay, Mai Katan Shelo Kalu Lo Chadashav. We mentioned the third item there, a preemie, a child who didn't finish months of gestation, destroys the world. What are we talking about? Oh, we're taking, it's not literal, but rather this is a metaphor for a sage who kicks or hates his teachers. In other words, a student who thinks they're already so great, like they're premature in their self-assessment, and they think, "Oh, I don't need my teachers, I already know more than them." And so that's someone who's still gestating. They still need more development, and already they think that they can know better than their teachers. Rabbi Abba Amar, Zeh tamid shelo higia lehora'ah u'moreh. Similarly, this refers to this child, someone who acts like a child. So this is a student who has not yet reached the level of giving a ruling, and yet he gives rulings. Right, he only studied for a short time, and he thinks he's an expert in the subject already, and he's giving rulings when there's other greater sages who know better. And a proof for this is what Rav said in interpreting this pasuk in Mishleh. The context of the pasuk in Mishleh is talking about a zonah. A zonah, besides the sin of zinut, also, many times she causes many to be wounded, many to be killed, because she'll get pregnant, she'll have many miscarriages, and many abortions, and so that's why it's so bad. That's another in addition to the problems of zinut. But Rav is explaining this, not referring to literally to zonot, but rather to this case. It actually refers to a sage who is not yet worthy of giving halachic rulings, and yet he gives halachic rulings. So like hipila, similar to it's premature. It causes these Torah teachings to be taught when they are not yet ready to be taught, and so that causes a lot of mistakes, errors, and problems. The second after the pasuk, asumim sounds like great ones. So what does that mean referring to? It is the opposite problem of someone who did reach the level of being worthy to give halachic rulings and doesn't give rulings. Says, "Oh, who am I? I can't teach. I can't say anything." That's also a problem, because we need poskim when people have questions, and if someone does have knowledge and is worthy and authorized to give halachic rulings, and they're scared, they don't want to say something controversial, they don't want to get criticized, and so they don't teach, that's also a problem. They go hand in hand, because if those who are worthy don't give halachot, then that opens a vacuum, and then will be filled by people who are unworthy. Okay, Vad Kama. Now we ask, how old should one be to be ready to teach halachic rulings? Ad arba'in shanin. You should study until you're 40. Before that is premature. Ini v'had Rabba oreh b'shavin. Hold on, Rabba, he was less than 40, and yet he was teaching halachot. So how was he allowed to? And the answer is, this is only talking about when they are equal. And there is no equal in the city, right? So if there are people that are over 40 and are great sages in the city, and you're under 40, then you should not teach. However, there's nobody more competent in the city than even if you're less than 40 and you're the most competent person around, so then you're better than nothing. That's when one has to teach, and that was the case of Rabba. He was the greatest in his city. There was no equal. Okay, umakot perushin. Now the Mishnah mentioned also that the injuries of the abstinent destroy the world. Okay, perushin again can have two meanings. It can mean with a capital P, the perushim, the group of Jews called the Pharisees, who were demonized by other groups for being hypocrites. Or it could mean with a lowercase, parush, those who keep away, who are abstinent, but in a hypocritical way. So either way, it's talking about hypocrites. If it's talking like with a capital P, that's a bit unusual, because the Pharisees are the intellectual predecessors of Chazal, of the rabbis. The most of the halachot that the rabbis say and the worldview, philosophy that the rabbis say are what the Pharisees said before them, and so it doesn't make sense that the Mishnah would be talking about the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. But what it could be is that because the word Pharisees became such a negative word, and so the rabbis themselves, they never called themselves Pharisees. Instead, they say, oh yeah, that word Pharisees is referring to people, anyone, including those within the rabbinic group who are hypocrites, right? And so we don't like hypocrites either. And so hypocrites anywhere. So therefore, the word Pharisees comes to mean those who look overly pious on the outside, but actually are hypocritical and not pious at all. And so that's what the word comes to mean, but it also is related to abstinent, that they keep themselves away from things that actually are even permitted, just to show off how pious they are. So we're going to see now, Tanur Banan Shiva Perushin Hen, there are 7 types of abstinent people. It looks like all of them are bad, except the last 2 look like they're not bad. So really, it's only five categories of negative ones, as the Gemara will explain. Parush shichmi, parush nikfi, parush kizai, parush medochya, parush mechovati ve'asena, parush mehava, parush miyir'ah. So these 7 abstinent people, we'll explain each one in turn. Let's just do that. Parush shichmi ze oseh maaseh shechem. An abstinent person like those of Shechem. So remember, people of Shechem, they agreed to be circumcised, but not because they really wanted to enter into the Brit and become part of Bnei Israel, but rather they did it for personal gain. Oh, look, if we get circumcised, then we can go and take their daughters and marry in. And so they did it only for their own selves and not for actual good. So that's the first kind of abstinence, but for a different material goal, or to gain power or something else. Parush nikfi is those who knock into things. They knock their feet together. These are people who take very little steps, right? Toe to heel. Or heel to toe, and because that they shuffle their feet, they don't pick up their feet because they're walking so slowly and humbly, and because of that they keep stubbing their toes and knocking their feet against each other and against rocks and things, and so they are just outwardly in the way they walk pious. But they just do it to show off. Perush kizai, the bloodletting abstinent. Zamarav Nachman bar Yitzchak zemekizdam laketalim. These are people who walk with their eyes closed because they don't want to see anything that might be improper, and so they walk. Since because they walk with their eyes closed, they keep banging into walls, and that causes them to bleed, and so they're bleeding all over like someone who lets blood, and they don't mind. They like doing this. It's like the scene and Monty Python of the people that are walking and they keep banging their heads with boards every few steps. So that's a literal example of these people to show just how righteous they are. They walk with their eyes closed. Parush medochia amar Rabba bar Shela dem shapa ki madochia. Pestle-like abstinence. They walk bent over like a pestle of a mortar, right? They're always walking all the way bent over, as to show how humble they are. But they are not really such great people. If you know what else they do, they just do this to show off how pious they are. Parush mechovati ve'asena hamal yutahi eladamar machovati tu ve'asena. And the 5th category is someone who says, "What is my obligation? Tell me what to do, and I will do it." So we ask, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a good thing. Someone who keeps saying, what am I supposed to do? And here, the problem is that they say, "What else is my obligation? I will do it." As if they do everything perfectly, right? And they say, "Okay, tell me what else I should be doing." And so they think so highly of themselves that they kind of showing off. Yeah, I'm perfect. And it looks like they're looking for more things to do, but I'm sure they could find lots of things that they could improve on without having to announce in public, right? Everyone, tell me what else I should be doing. Okay, so that's the 5 negative categories. But then we have parush mehava, parush miyir'ah. Someone who is abstinent because of love, and someone who does it out of fear. They do mitzvot out of love, which is the greatest thing. That's the highest level. Out of fear of punishment. So that's not as good, but it's still not terrible. So Amru le Abaye v'Rava letana lo titani parush mehava parush mir'ah. So Abaye told Rava, Abaye and Rava rather told the Tana. Here's an example of the professional memorizer. The memorizer, he just recites 7. He likes the number 7. Easy to remember 7 things. But Abaye and Rava correct the memorizer and say, listen, don't repeat the last 2. That should not be part of it. There's only 5 negative Perushim, the last two, are good, right? If someone does mitzvot and keeps away from bad things because out of love of Hashem or out of fear, that's good. Amarav Yehuda Amarav Leolam Yasok Adam Bator Mitzvot Afilu Shelo Mishma Shemitoch Shelo Lishma Balishma. Rav taught that a person should involve himself with Torah and Mitzvot, even if it's not for its own sake, if it's for the sake of reward or fear of punishment. It's still a good thing to do, better than nothing, because eventually, even though they're doing it for a different reason, eventually they'll come and do it for the sake of the mitzvah itself. And therefore, certainly Ahava is good, and even Yir'ah is a good reason. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, mi tamera umedeu de megalia bedin araba litpera mehani de hafu gundi. Along the same thing, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, things are hidden, that which is revealed, but in heaven they know everything, and the court in heaven will exact payment from those who wear a cloak of the righteous, but in fact are fake, are unworthy. In other words, we don't always know what people are thinking, what people are doing in private. So those things we know, we judge. And those who make believe that they are righteous, but they are actually hypocrites, right? Then the heavenly court will take care of them. Amar la yanai malka ledevite. אל תתייראי מן הפירושין, ולא ממי שאינן פירושין, אלא מן הסבועים שדומים לפרושין, שמעשיהן כמעשה זמרי, ומבקשים שכר כפנחס. A very important source, the King Yanai. This is referring to Alexander Yanai, one of the Hasmonean kings, a very evil king. He was a Sadducee himself. He's the one that the people threw etrogim at him, and he went and killed and crucified sages, caused a civil war. So he was a really, really bad guy. And Josephus actually has a version of this very story. Josephus reports that King Yanai, at the end of his life, he told his wife, Shlom Sion HaMalka, she's going to be the next queen. And at the end of his life, he said, listen, I had a hard time because I followed the Sadducees. If you want to have a better reign, you should follow the Pharisees. And at the end of his life, he made teshuvah and he recognized his error. And sure enough, his wife is remembered as a very righteous queen, and everybody loved her. So that's what Josephus reports. You can see it here, where the source is. So here, this Talmud reports that King Yanai told his wife, don't worry about the Perushin, and don't worry about those who are not Perushin. In other words, those who are actually actual Pharisees, who are committed, good Pharisees, they're all right, and the opposite group, the Sadducees, they're also okay. They're not going to give you a hard time. You really have to be careful of the hypocrites, those who are colored, that look like Perushin. In other words, they wear clothing that make them look like Pharisees, as if they're pious, but they're really evil people. Shemasen kemase zimri umbakeshin sachar kefinechas. Their actions are like Zimri, the one who took the foreign woman and sinned right in front of the Ohel Moed, in front of Moshe, in front of everyone. So they're evil as Zimri, but they want reward like Pinchas. Pinchas is the one who speared Zimri, and he got everlasting covenant of Kionat Olam. And so they want reward, but their actions are evil. They're the ones to really watch out for. So you see, this report in the Talmud is very similar to the report in Josephus. And here you see that there is an important distinction between Pharisees with a capital P. That refers to that group of people. It's a political group, a religious group, right? And they had a certain, it's like a political party, but also had a religious platform. And the Sadducees are also a political party to have a religious platform. And so they're also always fighting it out. But, that they each one does it out of the sincerity of their beliefs, and so you have to deal with them, right? But they're not the real threat. The real threat are the hypocritical Pharisees, because they just have it out for self-interest, and they're the ones that may cause you trouble. All right, fascinating discussion, and then we'll leave the next Mishnah till the next daf. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.